Are you trying to learn about wood turning but just don't know where to start? Well, stick around and we'll give you an introduction to this really fun, very creative hobby. Welcome to Turning Stitches. I'm Sean. Wood turning is one of my passions, and I find it to be very addictive. I completely lose track of time when I'm here working at my lathe, and it's always my favorite thing to do. I love to share my passions with other people, so I've created this series of lessons to help new wood turners or people just researching the hobby. These lessons should also help experienced wood turners just polish up on their fundamentals. These lessons are designed to help you improve your skills, gain confidence wood turning, and hopefully speed up your learning process so you can start creating those projects you're dreaming of much faster. I always like to say we help wood turners learn the craft to begin making fun projects faster. This video series will contain 10 lessons. Each of the lessons is designed to build upon the last one, and we'll be creating some fun, simple projects along the way. Each of the videos is designed to be short so that you can take it with you to your shop on your smartphone and work right along at your lathe with each of the lessons. We'll have all the videos in this series organized in a playlist on the channel, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can find those easily. We'll be posting a new lesson each week, and at the end of each of those videos, we'll have links and cards so you can easily find the next video in the series. Let's get into our first lesson. Today, we're going to be taking this square blank and making it round. But before we start turning on this piece, let's go over a few things here at the lathe just to make sure we've got a common vocabulary. So here on this end, I've got the headstock, and the headstock is where my motor attaches, and it kind of drives all the power and gives us all the torque we need when we're turning. Today we're going to be using a drive spur, which is just basically a point with some prongs on it, and that's going to hold our workpiece up against the headstock. Down here on the other end, we've got our tailstock, and the tailstock helps us apply pressure. Essentially, we're going to hold our workpiece between these 2 points, and the tailstock helps us apply pressure with this little wheel down here and hold everything together as we're turning. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as turning between centers. Also on the tailstock, we have a live center. So this is another point that's going to be down here on the end, but it spins freely. So this end spins freely, and this end down here where the drive spur is driven by the motor. What connects the headstock and tailstock is called the bed, or sometimes you'll hear it referred to as bedways. So that keeps everything aligned in between the headstock and tailstock. Another critical component here is our tool rest. So we'll be using our tool rest. This is where we're going to be resting our tools as we're cutting. And then what holds the tool rest in place is called a banjo. And the banjo glides and slides all along the bed, and it can move in and out, and it helps us reposition the tool rest depending on the project we're working on at the time. Before we turn on the lathe, we want to make sure we're turning safely. We're going to be creating a lot of wood chips, lots of debris, and a lot of dust. So in my opinion, a face shield is an absolute must. Now, I prefer using my safety glasses along with my face shield because I have had times when I was only using the face shield that I did get debris in my eyes, and of course it's no fun. In addition to protecting our eyes, we want to make sure we're protecting our lungs. I use this full face respirator most of the time when I'm turning, but especially sanding. You don't have to use something this bulky, but I would recommend a high quality dust mask of some sort that seals tightly around your face. I wouldn't use the paper dust mask that you get at the hardware store or big box store, but you do want something that'll filter out those fine particles. So here's what I look like most of the time when I'm turning. We also want to be careful with loose clothing or long hair. I wear long sleeve shirts in the shop, so I just make sure I have a cuff on my shirt sleeves or sweatshirt. Or if I'm wearing a button-up, I make sure I've got the sleeve buttoned. If you've got long hair, you want to make sure it's tied back and not hanging loose where it could get caught in the turning pieces some way. With all that out of the way, let's get to the fun. For this lesson, we're going to be taking a couple 2x4s. Basically, all I want to do is rip it down. So I've got 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. That's roughly 10 inches long. The length really isn't critical on any of this. And while you're over at the table saw or however you're cutting down your 2x4s or some scrap around the shop, Go ahead and make several of them so you can kind of practice. The next thing you want to do, I like to just mark a center line here on the end of my blank. Just take a straight edge, go right across. And I usually just use my live center or my drive center here. Just kind of get it lined up there where those lines intersect. Just kind of give it a little tap to create a little punch. And that'll give me a decent reference for my center. I'm going to do that on both ends. When I do the second end, I'm just going to go ahead and put it right into the headstock. Then I'm just going to bring up the tailstock and get the live center aligned in that mark that we just made with the punch, basically punching it. Tighten that down and we're ready to go. Once we've got our piece here in between centers, we're going to get the tool rest. I'm going to bring this out, get it positioned. So to start out with, I just want the tool rest basically at about the halfway or midway point. In this case, my tool rest is a little slightly wider than the blank, which is perfect. That'll make it a little bit easier. You want it close, but you don't want it touching, so I usually rotate the workpiece, just kind of make sure it clears. And then I just tighten everything up. I want to make sure my tool rest is tight. I want to make sure the tailstock is tightened up. And now we're pretty much ready to go. Today we're going to be using the spindle roughing gouge to turn this square blank into a dowel or into a cylinder. We're always covering a lot of information in these lessons, so make sure if you've got any questions, you add those to the comments, and then we can kind of all learn from each other. So now that we've got this ready, it turns freely, we're going to go ahead and kick on the lathe. We've got the lathe running at about 600 RPMs. Make sure you've got your lathe speed dialed in. This is a fairly comfortable pace, but make sure you've got it up or down depending on what you're comfortable with. And all we're going to do to get started, I'm going to lower my face shield here. So I've got the gouge anchored onto the tool rest. I'm just going to bring it up until I start getting, and I'm going to lift the bottom end of the handle just a little bit until I start picking up some chips. And then I'm just going to go from left to right. I like to do this where it's like kind of like a typewriter or even some corn on the cob. Usually work from one end to the other. Kind of back and forth. Another way you can do this is to work from one end. You can kind of come in and just work from this end, turning from a large diameter to small. So you can keep working it down this way until you're round. Like I said, my preference is usually to work from end to end. And we can just kind of work back and forth. Now that I've got a lot of the sharp corners off of this, I went ahead and turned up the speed on the lathe to about 1500 RPMs. So now you can see it's moving a lot faster, and it's going to cut a little quicker as well. Only turn up the speed if you're comfortable with it. So now we can move a little quicker.
I can check my progress by just laying this on here where if the tool bounces, like right there, not quite round. Got a little flat spot. Alright, now that we've essentially just got a cylinder or dowel rod here, one of the other little skills that's good to practice is just to try to make a nice smooth cut. So let me show you what I'm talking about. And this works better with the speed turned up. I'm going to move the tool rest up just a little bit, so I'm a little closer. So all I'm going to do, once I've got kicked back on, I'm going to make sure the bevel, I'm going to make sure I've got good bevel contact. So I've got the bevel right in here, no cutting. As I lift it up, I start cutting. I want to go really slow. By slowing that pace down, I'm going to get, and I've got the bevel riding, I should get a much smoother cut. So let's check that out. So you can see the difference. Here we may have had the bevel riding, but we were moving much faster. You can see all the different lines. Here we've got that pretty smooth. So as you're practicing, not only do you want to get it round, but also kick up the speed once you're comfortable with it, ride that bevel, and try to create a nice smooth cylinder. Congratulations! You've taken your square blank, now it's round, we've got our cylinder here. So now it's just a matter of practice, practice, practice. And practice is great if you've got your extra blanks. You can also try to refine this down to a consistent diameter. That's another challenge that helps practice. You can make smooth cuts like this end here. Those are all just good things to keep working on, and it'll help you practice and help improve your skills. Now that we've dulled your roughing gouge here in lesson 1, our next lesson is going to be on sharpening. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on your notifications so you'll know when that next lesson comes out. I'm looking forward to seeing you in our next lesson.